Blog Talk Radio.
Sorry about that. We were having some issues here. That happens. You know, it ain't always a smooth transition, but hey, I'm happy to be here, and I hope that you guys are as happy to be here as I am. Tonight, we are going to talk about some good stuff. We're going to actually examine slavery in America. All right, my guest will be TheTashaXi. She will be coming on in a few minutes, and we're just gonna get into it, because this is something that we need to talk about. Because, to be honest with you, we still have a slavery mentality, not understanding that most of us weren't even slaves. Slavery was something that was actually marginal. It wasn't. It didn't consist of every last black person in America being a slave, contrary to popular belief. And of course, you have some of us who are taking that, and they are making bank doing it. But we're gonna talk about that. But I want to go over a couple of things really quickly. I like to go through the trend stuff, and of course, right now everybody is still in shock over Trump, which is funny as hell to me, because I don't think you guys. And I'm gonna have a show on this whole deal a little later on in the month, but possibly even next week. But I don't understand it. I don't understand why everybody thinks like Lucifer Jr.'s in office, and blah blah blah, and oh my God, you got people who are threatening to leave the country, which ain't going to happen. Those African Americans, they don't particularly go to Africa much, I noticed. But I don't get it. I don't. To me, the lesser of two evils actually got in office. Trump's a horrible businessman. Sure, he's a bigot. Sure, he's a misogynist. Sure, he's a xenophobic. He's a xenophobic pervert. Sure, he's a thief. Sure, he's a liar. Most certainly, sure, he's all of those things. All right, he's gonna probably bankrupt the country even more than bankrupt than it is now. And America is in bankruptcy. We both know that. It's trillions in debt. It's a debt that it'll never probably get out of. Sure, he's going to do all of those things. All right, but he's going to put it in perspective, because he's going to put us in perspective, because he ain't going to listen to a damn word that we got to say. Not one. See, we didn't hold Obama's feet to the fire. We didn't basically make him answer to us. And so if we didn't make Barry do it, then why in the world is Trump going to listen? But the thing is, he's going to put it in perspective for a lot of people, because a lot of these yokel hillbillies, grits, bumpkins, they're about to suffer even worse, and they don't even realize it, because Trump doesn't like poor people, regardless of race. He doesn't like poor people. He's never been poor. So, hey, it is what it is with that one. I don't see why everybody's, going crazy over it. And Hillary certainly wasn't the answer either. I keep telling people, Hillary will kill you, and then she'll go to work on you. So I don't get it. But that's the only thing that I really saw that was interesting, that was trending. So we're going to get into it really quickly. We're going to get into examining slavery, right? Because we have an ideal, and of course we've been taught the propaganda of slavery of 400 years, blood, sweat, and tears, and blah blah blah, and we's in bondage, and this and that and the third. But in reality, there's another side to slavery, and it's funny, because I remember, let's say middle school, 7th, 8th grade. I remember in my social studies class, not so much history as much as it was social studies class, some of the very things that we're going to talk about tonight, Tasha and myself, right? And they were teaching us then. I remember in 8th grade, Mr. Yates used to teach us that, that you had slaves that married freed people, vice versa. They could leave the plantation, stay, elsewhere for days. They obviously, did contract work. Obviously, they did contract work for other people, things of that nature. He talked about that then. Then all of a sudden we went into the roots era, and we're right back to we getting whipped every day. We getting and it's like, well, you got to show all sides of this. But then again, that's the whole African narrative too. And everything that I have read, and I read a lot, on the subject, just to see up to date. A lot of stuff I already knew, but just up to date stuff. It's all the same. It's all the same. Who brought the slaves to America? The True History of Slavery in the U.S. This is from Arcandum Deep Secrets. It's WordPress. All right, it's like a blog. Okay, now they go on to the history of slaves in America begins with Christopher Columbus. Well, that's correct, but okay, even then they go into the whole deal of Africans, right? But this one brings a perspective that's different from most that you'll read. It says, his voyage to America was not financed by Queen Isabella, but by Louis de Santangelo, who advanced the sum of 17,000 ducats, probably about 5,000 pounds, equal to about 50,000 pounds today, to finance the voyage, which began on August 3rd, right? Okay, but it said that Columbus was accompanied by 5 Marranos, who are basically Jews who had, they forsworn their religion, and they supposedly were Catholics, which they weren't, but that's neither here nor there. And for the most part, these Jews, right, pretty much aided and abetted Columbus in the capturing of 500 Indians and then selling them in Spain. That's actually correct. That's the most correct thing that I read today. But we get into other things. Let's see. This one starts off. This is Ceylon, right? Ceylon, for the most part, after that first 1619 shipload, some 100,000 more enslaved Africans would sail upriver past Old Point Comfort, this is Virginia, lying in chains in the holds of slave ships. They could not see the land until they were brought up on deck to be sold. Now, you know how long of a trip that is? To be not see land, you're basically in the dark for 3 months. You know what that would do to a person? But we'll get into that. Okay, here's another one. This is Thomas Sowell, right? And he has, it's called, 7 Myths of Slavery and Racism in America, right? And even he goes into the whole deal of Africans being bought. This is Thomas Sowell now. Okay, slavery. Here's another one. This is called Slavery Myths Debunked, right? And the first one, of course, they tell you is the Irish. The Irish were slaves too. And they get a tweet from some Wasichu chick named Carol who says, actually, my ancestors were Irish slaves here. We don't still whine about it. We move forward, not backwards. Well, Carol, good for you. Bless your heart, you ignorant cracker, you. Not basically understanding that you're not whining about it because they gave your ass land after you served your time as slaves, and then you yourselves tried to own slaves, which we'll get into as well. But we're in it actually already. I just wanted to share these things because pretty much everything that you read, you're always going to talk about 1619. You're going to talk about Africans arriving here. You're going to talk about them arriving by the shiploads to the tune of 12 million over the course of 4 centuries. Okay, we're going to talk about that. We both know this is what we were taught. I get that, but we're in the age of knowing. We're in the information age, and if you really want to find this stuff out, if you're really a truth seeker, you would already know that slavery pretty much in the Americas began actually from the Caribbean to Europe, not from Africa to the Americas. So with that said, I'm going to bring in my guest, TheTashaXi. Hi, Tasha. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing great.
Okay, you've been listening, correct?
Right. Mhm.
Okay, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, what are your thoughts on just the whole slavery issue in general? Because, as you know, I mean, we're taught propaganda. So,
right.
What are your thoughts on just slavery in America in general? We'll start there.
Slavery in America in general, there's a lot of misconceptions out there. Just like you just put out about the African slaves coming here first. And we know by looking at the numbers, this is the numbers that they give us, that they let us see. Most of the slaves went to Europe. They didn't come to even Brazil or North America or anywhere, or the Caribbean. Most of them, probably over half of them, probably more than that, went to Europe. And the bulk of the so-called African slaves, they said, came here, went to Brazil.
Right.
So, and yeah, then also the numbers that they give us, it's not the numbers of the people who actually made the voyage. Those are the numbers of the people who got on the so-called ships that they claim came over here. So I was looking at the numbers on slavevoyages.org. It's a website that they put together. I think 2 British researchers put together with, I guess, all the different papers that they could find on the records of the ships. So the numbers that they said that came over here, let's see. The numbers of the Africans that they said came here was only 305,000 Africans.
Right.
Now we get from the, certain leaders in our community, we get the numbers that 80 million, 100 million came over in total.
Yeah.
And millions came over here, but this is from their numbers. These are inflated numbers at that 305 and 305,326 Africans got on the ship to come here. Now, when you go back and look on that site, you can see how many disembarked, how many people actually got off the ship. And those numbers are only 252,652. So it's like you're losing like over 50,000 people right there, at least. And that's just the people that they claim came here.
Right.
So, like, when you look at all the records and everything, the numbers don't add up. And then they never get into Indian slavery.
No,
that's
they don't.
There's always something hidden. So once you actually get into the knowledge of the Indian slavery, you will see that a large bulk of the slaves were actually indigenous to America.
Exactly. And as far as that African boat ride where they were throwing so many Africans off the ships that the sharks were following the ships. All right, all that stuff, right? That foolishness.
Right.
Okay, that didn't begin in 1619, correct?
No. So once I actually did the research with that, let me see. If you look at on slavevoyages.org, they have the numbers up here, and it says, let's see. It says the first Africans if you look at the actual records, it's a bunch of zeros going down. So they claim that Africans came here in 1619, correct? But if you actually look at the actual records, the first Africans arrived in 1626. And from 1626, yes. So that's how many years later? So from 1626 to 1650, that's only 702 people that supposedly were enslaved from Africa that came to the whole North America. That's including Canada. So Canada and the U.S. So when I look at for the 1690, it says 0 on there. So we have the claims. Jamestown, every year we have this, because I'm from Virginia, so every amount of years they talk about celebrating Jamestown or whatever. They talk about 1690 when the first Africans came. But the real records actually came from John Rouse.
Right.
And he was right. It was these numbers are based off a letter that he wrote. And he said 20 odd some Negroes came to Jamestown. But he never says African.
Right.
So when you dig deeper into that, I don't believe they all were from Africa. I met this archaeologist that used to work for Mary Washington University here in Virginia. I had a couple conversations with him. So he said he was actually one of the people that worked on the Jamestown Preservation Project that they had a couple years ago. And he said that those 20 Negroes were really Moors from Europe or captured Moorish pirates. That's what he said. So yeah, he worked on the Jamestown Preservation Project for many years. So he actually lived down there. He's well versed in the history of Jamestown, and he was hands-on with the documents and the artifacts. So he is saying that they were really Moors from Europe. So I'm going to take his word on that. And then the actual records, like I said before, the actual records said the first Africans arrived in 1626, not 1619.
Well, I'm inclined to believe your friend, because the reality is that Moors were here. I don't think Africans arrived in 1626 either. I don't think that that happened. I can't see it. I can't see it, because if you just look at what was going on in Africa at that time, Africa had enough problems dealing with not only the Europeans over there that were trying to conquer them, but they also had problems dealing with the Arabs. So I don't see that. I don't see that at all. Hey, let me ask you. Okay. Okay. When did you discover the real truth about slavery?
This was a couple of years ago.
How old were you when you discovered it?
How old?
Well, not how old, but when.
I was in it was a couple of years ago. Actually, I was working at the time, and I decided to go back to school. So I had to start from the bottom, taking History 101 or whatever. So this was about 4 or 5 years ago. I had a college professor. He was a brother. He was dropping in his class. He said he wasn't going to go by the stereotypical curriculum. So he was dropping a lot of knowledge on the real numbers and the events that took place. And he was really debunking the exaggerated numbers of 80 to 100 million Africans being enslaved here. So,
and he kept his job?
He actually got his doctorate, so he's moving up to different schools. But, yeah, he still works. But he was saying that those numbers, if that were true, they would have completely depopulated certain areas of West Africa. He said it didn't add up. And he also mentioned indentured servitude, that they used a lot of indentured servants from the British Isles. He actually went into how they would, so they actually depopulated instead of Africa, they depopulated certain towns in Ireland. Certain towns in Ireland were completely wiped out. What they did was they started off setting up kind of like recruitment. They have military recruitments now. They had them for recruiting for workers. And they would have people kind of trick them into signing these contracts. They'll have them waiting in these buildings. It sounds similar to the African tale, right? They have them locked in these buildings, and they'll have to wait for like months until they could get, forced on the ship and sent over here. Once they started taking all the adult men of certain age, they actually went for the children. If you went out to play, he said like random children would get picked up and shipped off away from their parents and everything. Because with the tale of indentured servitude, they say everyone willingly signs up and everyone gives their consent, but children can't really give their consent to do work, And people like in Ireland that are uneducated, they can't read the papers that they're signing. So a lot of, trickery went into that.
Right.
And then he also went into the Indian slavery, pointing out that a lot of the East Coast Indians were the first to be. And I actually did some more research on that, and I found out that the Algonquins, which my family is a part of, the Algonquins.
They're part of what again? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yeah, my family is Algonquin descent.
Mm-hmm.
So the Algonquins of the whole East Coast were really, and up into Canada too, were the first people to be enslaved here. Before they start sending, these indentured servants in, they started to just go to random villages and start picking up women and children. My family is of Mattaponi and Pamunkey descent. According to Mattaponi oral history, the English were raiding the villages,
Right.
when the men went out to hunt. So they would come and steal the women and the children and try to rape them and take them as personal slaves. And sometimes the elders would, if they knew that they were coming, they would try to take the children and hide in the woods, while the women, the mothers, and the children would beg the English to take them instead of the children.
Right.
And after the death of Pocahontas, it got worse because the Queen funded the Virginia Company to make them a permanent settlement. So the English, they would start attacking Powhatan villages and completely take over the village and just build a house there right in the middle of the village where they had the fields, because Powhatan women were the ones who actually worked the fields and knew how to tend to the crops. So what they would do, they would completely take over towns and turn them into plantations. And they would make sure they enslaved the women so they could teach the Irish or whoever else were coming in how to work, how to plant crop like corn and tobacco, because tobacco was the cash crop of Virginia. It was very hard it was a very hard crop to cultivate. So those women.
Speaking from experience, I know.
Yeah, so those it would have to be the indigenous women to be the ones that taught them how to grow it. It couldn't be someone from Africa or someone from Ireland. It would have to be the indigenous women, because the women in America were the ones who did the farming. And those chain of events kind of moved up to Massachusetts, where the Pequot and the Wampanoags were the ones, they were enslaved after their wars with the English up there, the English and the Dutch. And actually the Pequot, let's see, I think I have a quote. Let me read this off about the Pequot. All right. So the Pequot, they were, let's see, I'm going to read it from the top. In the wake of the Pequot War, New England in 1637, 17 Pequot Indians, 15 boys, 2 women, were ordered to be sent to New England by Massachusetts officials. Hundreds of captives have been taken by the English Puritans as a result of the colonists' triumphs in battle and the Mystics and the Great Swamp. Subsequently, many Pequot men were put to death, and others were ordered and divided among the soldiers, given to the Narragansetts, or assigned to Connecticut and Massachusetts colonies. 17 women and boys were marked for sale in the remote Atlantic island of Bermuda. For some reason, Captain Pierce missed his landing and continued on to the West Indies. And once there, Pierce deposited his cargo in the tiny Puritan outpost off the coast of Nicaragua at Providence Island, where at the stroke of the pen, the Providence Island Company had turned the rebel Pequots cannibal Negroes and condemned them to serve out the rest of their lives in slavery in the Anglo-American First Free Slave Society. So right there you see who some of the indigenous people were. Because how can they turn Geronimo into a Negro?
Right.
It doesn't.
Exactly.
It doesn't make any sense. How can you mistake someone that looks like that with an African?
Exactly. And the thing about the Pequot War was Crispus Attuck's father was actually involved in the Pequot War. A lot of people don't actually know that, but his father.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
In
school, I was always taught that he was an Indian. Crispus Attuck, I always thought he was Indian, and then down the line, years later, he just turned to an African somehow, or half African and half Indian. But when I was growing up,
he was a Wampanoag. They try to say now that he may have been a Native American slave or freeman, merchant seaman, or a dock worker of Wampanoag in African descent. He was Wampanoag. That's really what he was. All right. And his father was Wampanoag. And his father was in the Pequot Wars. He actually fought along the side of, and of course they called him a mulatto, but they would call anybody a mulatto rather than call them an Indian. It's what they did with the people from the Caribbean. They started calling them mulattoes to declassify them, to declassify them as Indian. But yeah, his father actually fought in the Pequot Wars actually with the Dutch and the British. He basically walked off of away from his people, and he became indoctrinated, and he died in the Pequot Wars, as a matter of fact. And so his son follows suit, because his son is raised by this time. He's not raised as a Wampanoag anymore. As a matter of fact, I don't even think he could speak the language anymore by the time, with Christopher Addis. But yeah. But really quickly, okay. Anybody who wants to get into this conversation, because we're just really getting cranked up. All right.
Right.
We're running just warm right now, but we're getting ready to heat it up. So anybody who wants to get involved in the conversation, 657-383-0630 is the number to call. Press 1 if you have a question or comment. And for those online, if you have any questions or you had any comments to make, we'll read them out for you. But really quickly, right, for people to understand this, right?
Yo, hey, how's it going?
Hey, what's up, Clee?
No, it ain't Clee.
I'm sorry. Who is this?
It's D.
Hey, what's up, D? What's going on, bro?
I'm good, man. Hey, check it out. I don't know what year this was, but I think it was like in the late 1600s. It was King James, which he was a black man. As we starting to figure this whole thing out, he actually made it. Yeah, he made it against Christian. Made it a Christian law that you couldn't enslave Indians no more. So if you check out the slave posters where they were selling slaves, they start selling them as Negroes. But you'll see the slaves, they're dressed up in Indian attire. They'll be wearing feather crowns, feather dresses, and everything. But if you look at the wording on the posters, it'll say from the West Indies, Hawaii, and other little countries around the Americas. So they went from using Indian to using just Negroes, and they were still selling, Indians into slavery. Like in the movie 12 Years a Slave, they went and stole the man up north. He was living up north, middle class, already graduated as an architect and everything. So what they did, they just switched it up from Indian to Negro, and a lot of people they don't understand, like, slavery wasn't that common because only 6% of people even owned slaves in them 13 slave states, because the cost of slaves were like $1,200 to like all the way up to $32,000 of what would be today. So slavery wasn't that common. So the whole thing about slavery is blown out of proportion. But what I'm scared of, because they send all these white Irish and white Scottish over here. I'm scared one day, they really gonna find this shit out, and they're gonna come and try to get these reparations.
They'll be the ones that get them before we will. I think you know that. Hey, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I was actually getting ready to get into that. All right, of how they would classify us in order to, because like you said, King James pretty much made it where you couldn't enslave Indians, right? Okay, I forget the passage that I read where he was saying that it is unfit for a man to be enslaved on his own land. All right, now keep in mind, the English enslaved their own people all the time. As a matter of fact, they didn't get out of slavery literally until the late 19th century. All right, And across Europe didn't get out of slavery literally until World War I, World War II. But, you know, that was feudalism slavery. It's not the same deal. Japan had the same deal going on with feudalism slavery as well. You know, feudal lords that were running certain areas, with your samurai. All right, but, okay, he made it unfit for Indian to be enslaved in his own land, so therefore they began the declassification, which is what you're talking about. Meaning, okay, we got to get these niggas, but we can't have them called Indian. We're going to call them Negro. So we think that, because most of us tend to think that we get the whole Negro term, where they, I don't know what in the world they think now, because there's so many stories abound of it. But the reality is they changed the classification for financial purposes. And you're correct. Only 6% of the people really own slaves because they were expensive. All right. So a lot of the times, most people, and I think you put something up about this, Tasha. They own maybe 1 to 4 slaves tops.
Right.
They couldn't own any more slaves than that. They were too poor to own any slaves more than that. These sprawling plantations and stuff that you saw, you didn't start to see that literally on average until maybe about the 19th century, but certainly not in the 16th, 17th, early 17th century. You didn't see it.
Well, it was only certain families, planter families, the elite that had plantations. Like the average person just had a regular house or a regular store, and they used the slaves like employees. I'm not saying that they didn't treat them bad, but they were more like an employee type of person. They weren't out in the field picking cotton. They're probably working behind the register, sweeping up or whatever, or just working in the house and cooking with the wife or things like that. Everybody wasn't in cotton fields, 100 deep out there in the hot Georgia sun. Like, people were doing different things. And like you said before, people had jobs. If they finished their work at their, with their master, they had other jobs, and they went and visited friends and did other stuff too. But I mean, I'm not saying it was all good, but it wasn't, it's not fair to say that every moment of their life was torture. But
we know it wasn't Club Med. I mean, clearly slavery is slavery. I mean, George Washington owned a large plantation in Monticello, but really, Martha owned that plantation because she had all the money. But, I mean, obviously George wasn't kind to Negroes. He was pulling out their teeth to try to save his own. So, yeah, I mean, clearly, you had that going on. Thomas Jefferson was known to be a bit cruel and harsh. But these are the people who could afford the slaves, who did have the sprawling plantations. Monticello is Thomas Jefferson. George Washington is not Valley Forge. Good grief, I'm bugging. And I went to his house too. I visited that spot.
Mount Vernon, Virginia.
Yes, Mount Vernon. I'm bugging. But AD, you still there?
I think he ended up. But there's an interesting story about George Washington too, and one of his slaves. He had this young female slave, and so they try to act like we are all obedient and yes master and this and that, but this girl, she did what she wanted to. She talked back to Martha and George. She refused to work. She would leave the plantation and go hang out with free people of color, and she basically pushed the limit. She didn't do anything that she was told to do. And one day she was out hanging out with one of her friends who was a free woman of color, and Martha happened to see her, and she told her, "You need to go home." And the slave cussed out Martha. Her and her free friend cussed her out, and they beat her up.
Yeah, I read that.
Martha went home. Yeah, you heard that? She went home and she told the overseer. And the overseer had to beg George Washington to let him beat this young lady because, she had gone too far. He was like, "You're too lenient on the slaves." And so he eventually let the man beat her, but the girl still wouldn't work. And the thing with George Washington I'm not saying he was a good guy or whatever.
Well, he wasn't all that benevolent, but what we don't understand, and a lot of them at that time, that they understood that these people pretty much owned the land, and now you're trying to enslave them. It wasn't going to be an easy transition. Plus, he had to eat, and who knew the fields better than we did? So,
well, in his actual will, he said he wanted to free his slaves, but most of the slaves that he owned was Martha's slaves. So he
right,
said, in his
exactly.
will,
Martha
upon
had
her
all the money.
death, yeah. So upon her death, he said he would free his slaves if she agreed to that.
Right.
So he was more complex than they show him to be. I mean, he had a deep hatred for Native people, but he also didn't like the institution of slavery.
A lot of them at that particular time didn't like the institution of slavery. You had some that bought into it. You had some who came over here for the specific intent and purpose of slavery.
Right.
A lot of them were Jewish, however. A lot of your slave. And see, the thing about the Jews is this: they adapt in the sense of they change their name to sound however. Whatever the names of that country are, they change their last names to accommodate that, to appear less Jewish. It's like a Rothschild. That's not really their name. All right. They basically came up with the name Rothschild to sound more English. And that's what they do. That's what they do all the time, and that's what they did here. Once they got here, they would change their names. As for George Washington, no, he wasn't the most benevolent man in the world, but he wasn't the most evil cat either. Like like he's made out to be. No more than the pictures that you see of Abraham Lincoln are real. Those aren't real pictures of Abraham Lincoln. He didn't look like that. That's the wrong skin tone. He had an indigenous mother, for God's sake. So, the thing I read that about Martha, where the slave beat her up. She wouldn't work.
Yeah.
She wouldn't talk back. But I also read that she was the foremost seamstress and was making them a shitload of money. So she was one of the best seamstresses around. So Martha and George relied on her because she herself was a cash crop because, of the clothes that she made. She made them really look fine. Really look fine in terms of their clothes. So, and I suspect she wasn't born in servitude anyway.
Right, yeah.
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 So, okay, we get into 1492, we understand, just so that we're clear. 1492 is really when slavery in the Americas, the Caribbean and Americas, started. Christopher Columbus came over, he took 500 back with him to Spain, right? Okay.
Right.
He comes back. His second voyage, he brings more ships, and they take even more slaves, correct?
Right.
Okay.
And then he actually had the Moors were the ones, the European Moors were the ones driving the ships.
Exactly.
Which a lot of people don't know.
Yes, because Columbus was a horrible. First off, Columbus was and let's stop calling him Columbus. His name was Cristobal Colon. All right, Colon.
He was actually a Moorish Jew himself. He was
Yes, he was. So when you watch Captain Jack Sparrow and all that, the pirate movie Pirates of the Caribbean, Jack Sparrow was a Moor. All those guys were Moors. Most of your pirates were well-educated people. All right, you could do more than just read maps. They were well-educated, the whole nine, and then they would go out and get a crew that couldn't read and that was dependent and hanging on their every word. Most of them, they got out of prison, jails, things of that nature. They were thieves, reprobates, cutthroats, and all of this. Okay, but the smartest guy in the room still always is the most powerful guy in the room, especially when he treats them like a little something, particularly better than they're treated at home. So that's why these guys would get these crews. A lot of your pirates pretty much, your pirates didn't raid anybody, just anybody. They raided those who didn't have treaty papers who were selling through the Caribbean. If they had treaty papers, they would leave them alone because they didn't want to basically, a country bearing down on them for it, one that they would have to answer to and would still be beholden to. This thing that pirates were just, they just didn't answer anybody, they got patches on their eye with a parrot on the shoulder. That's Hollywood. That's not reality. That's not reality at all. So, yes, you're quite correct. Colony, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to add that the pirates were a big force in the slave trade. They were actually the first traders, and that started with them taking people from the British Isles to Africa. Right. And the Middle East.
Right.
So that whole got jealous of how much money, of course, and they were taking their people, and that's how they got into, their slavery stuff.
Right. But the Moors played let's just say, an essential part of in slavery. Would we agree?
Yeah.
Yes,
And then also
very
a
much.
lot of the people, like we saying George Washington and people like that, they are amalgamated Moors. They're Moorish descent way down the line.
Right.
Somebody in the family was a Moor, and that's why they're in the position that they're in when the Moors dominated Europe.
Exactly. They learned the Moorish science, because people also don't understand that, being a Moor, you belong to a secret society. There's a reason why they call it the Moorish science. So these guys were indoctrinated. George Washington wanted no part of the Illuminati or any of that other stuff. He was a Mason, he was a Moor. He didn't want any parts of it. He saw the oncoming, of what they were about and what they were doing, and he wanted no parts of it whatsoever, said he would never join, and he would do everything that he could to keep them from infiltrating the country. Of course, poor George didn't understand that they were already here. The fact that you call Washington, D.C. the District of Columbia, that's all Illuminati stuff. We'll get into that another time. Right now, we have a call on the line, area code 919. Area code 919, you're on the Rich Report. What's on your mind?
Hey, what's up, Gabe?
What's going
Hello.
on, Clee? I got the right person
Hey,
this time. My bad, D. Hey, if you're still listening, D, my bad, bro.
I was sitting here like, when you called it out, I was sitting here like, damn, I didn't push the button yet. Oh, man.
We all sound alike.
Hey, you know that. Sound alike, look alike, everything. You know that's right, bro.
What's on your mind, bro?
Man, well, I'm kind of glad it did take a few minutes, because I had to dig deep in this freaking redneck white man's ass about some dumb shit he had to say. So,
Was it
yeah,
Ben, was it?
Dude, when you're going to try to say everything that's bad that's happened, well, of course he's a Trump supporter. And,
Oh, God. Is this Ben?
Yeah, so, no, not Ben. So,
Oh, wow.
So you know if he's going to say something about how the country's going to hell in a handbasket since he's been in office, I'm like, well, shit. All you motherfuckers that say that don't say nothing about what George Jr. did. So, and then of course he wanted to say something about how the Democrats have been black people's worst enemy. I said, shit, the Republicans hasn't done us no favor. And of course, Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act. I say, you know what? I said, none of them laws were ever enforced for 15 to 20 years afterwards.
Thank you.
I said, kiss me with that stuff. And then, of course, I was racist. So, yeah, so I was called racist, and he kept on with his words. So I had to straight up and down tell him, look, I said, check this out. I said, anytime you want to say this stuff to me face to face, let me know when. Then I'm told to calm down. So I told him, leave me the fuck alone.
Was this on Facebook?
You know me, bro. I ain't no keyboard tough guy, so hey, I ain't saying I'm a tough guy, but I don't play that keyboard stuff. We can get from behind it, and then we can meet men face to face, and then see what you got to say.
Doom doom, black angry man on aisle 3.
Thank you. Exactly. And on aisle 5, whoop the ass of a white man on aisle 5, come clean this shit up. I don't know, man. And it's so funny, I hate to, I'm sorry I veered off topic, but, I think it's just so funny that, and somebody posted a live video of what's going on in Baltimore. I saw 3 cops riding around during the protest on bicycles. Okay, all they had on was they had them windbreaker jacket, whatever on, but they had they was on bicycles. I'm like, yeah, it must be majority white, because good and well, if we had gotten together, they would have already put on the riot gear.
Oh, you know that. You know that. When they get out and riot and stuff, they're frolicking. It's horseplay. It's whatever excuse that they can make. Yeah.
Yeah, one
Yeah.
cop car, and they go ham. They just go crazy. So, it is what it is. But anyway, yeah, dude, yes, we are still on the plantation. We are still slaves. We're still slaves to the system, and for whatever reason, we don't believe it. But
And why is it that you think we don't believe it? I mean, why is it that you think we don't believe that we're slaves? I mean, and you're correct, by the way. White folks are slaves too, and they don't know it. Because privilege, they think privilege frees them from it. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think part of it is because, for whatever reason, we have been so indoctrinated in everything that's supposedly good is something that is done and for, or we're mistakenly thought that's owned or started by a white person. And so, for whatever reason, whenever they just come down to us, then somehow we have like, oh yes, blah blah blah. And so it's almost like it's the old adage of we don't believe anything unless the white person says it. We won't. Exactly. Because the whole slavery thing, and a lot of people don't realize, like in the period that you guys are talking about, people don't realize that they started passing a series of laws, statutes, and all that stuff that in time took away anybody of color's rights. And then they had a thing called meritorious manumission that pretty much that's what we've been on autopilot with till this day, which rewarded anybody who gave up any information about any kind of uprising, what your brothers are doing, what they're doing, da-da-da. Because we've been going on that. We've been living off that forever. How else can you explain that we are the only people that will fully and no shame about it, dime our own people out.
Yep.
Nice.
Yep. We're rats. I mean, Meritorious Manumission Act of, I think it's 1710 or 1712. It's one of those. But you're right. Also during that time, they had another act where any invention that a slave made, he got no credit for it. The credit went to the slave master, because the reality is most of your inventions came from us anyway.
Yep, exactly.
And here's the thing. Go ahead, Sasha. I'm sorry, sister. Go ahead.
No, yeah, that has to do with the patent office.
Yes.
They're saying the only thing the white man invented was the patent office, right?
That's it.
So the slave invented something, the master was only going to afford it. The patent.
Yeah.
It's the patent office.
That's it.
They don't want to take credit for racism.
Yeah. Oh, wow. They don't want to take credit for it, even though they're still benefiting from it like a mofo. They don't want to take any credit for it now. Too little, too late on that. That's why they use terms like reverse racist. That's the dumbest one I've heard. And didn't that come out of the 80s? It did. It came out of the 80s. Reverse racism.
Yeah, that's
when we became African American.
When because of affirmative action. So somebody smart started saying, well, that's reverse discrimination or reverse racism because you're trying to keep us from getting. Well, motherfucker, if there's 50 daggone positions to fill and 49 of them are filled by white people, you're trying to tell me that if we give it to a person of color, then that's discrimination. And the sad part about it is, on a lot of these reverse discrimination cases that white people brought to court, it was always found that their qualifications were beneath the people that were already filling the job who were of color, who was
no doubt.
Right.
And I thought that was odd. Here they were filling a quota, and yet their qualifications far exceeded what the minimum expectation was. But here it is, you're the one bringing it to court, and you're looking like Dumb Boudreaux.
Yeah, but they never talk about who's the one taking most of the positions with the affirmative action. And those are usually white women who are the ones that benefiting the most.
No doubt. Affirmative action benefited white women more than any other demographic, and that was all part of the plan. Affirmative action came along with feminism. We tend to forget that, too. They came along around the same time. And basically, we tend to also forget that a lot of white women, despite being poor And despite only being able to have somebody to come and wash their clothes and scrub their floors, all right, because, you know, they were filthy, trashy people, a lot of them. You know, the first time white women actually got to the forefront and started working was during World War II. And that was because there was a need for bodies. What I found, even in that, was a lot of sisters who were already employed, already working, started going to these factories, right, to the point where they were overqualified for the jobs and had to teach the white women pretty much the job, to learn the job, and then they would move up over that system. Or sometimes that system would be fired altogether when they thought they could handle it without them. What they usually found was their production slipped when that happened. So they would have to bring these sisters back. But of course, in doing so, they would demean them. They would try to make it seem like we're doing you a favor. You know, that type of that old chestnut. So okay, we're pretty much it's about 9:59, so we got about an hour left in the show. And again, if you want to call in, you want to talk about it, you want to discuss it, 657-383-0630. We are discussing, or we are actually examining slavery in America, because we tend to think slavery is one way, and slavery was not what you think it is. Slavery was multi-layered, multi-dimensional, and very tricky. Very, very tricky. Very, very tricky. So, okay, we've come. Tasha is my guest, TheTashaXi. Clee is on the line with us, Brother Clee, and we are dialoguing like a mofo right now because we're getting ready to dive a little bit deeper. We've already come to the deal with, we know about Cristobal Colon. I'm stopped calling him Columbus. People don't even know why they even gave him that name. And it was because of indoctrination. He got indoctrinated into a secret society. Yeah, Cristobal Colon. All right, he got indoctrinated, and once he carried out his task, because Columbus was under a mad stretch to bring back resources, mainly gold, because he said that he would find gold pretty much in the Indies, right? So, and he was correct, because Haiti is full of gold right now. Haiti, the Dominican, actually the Haiti side. And Haiti's the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, people. It's the poorest country and will always be poor because they did something they weren't supposed to do. He kicked the French's ass, all right? So they're going to remain poor. But on that landmass, that island, Haiti is a richer part of the island than is the Dominican Republic, right? So Columbus really wasn't far off when he was looking for gold. Now, he didn't know gold was there. You know, of course, the Arawaks, who were on the island, they knew, but he didn't know that at the time. He didn't know what was going on. So in his failure to bring back gold, what he did was he bought back slaves. He bought back people, human chattel. Okay, so as Dee was saying about Africa, you have to understand something. At the time going on in Africa, okay, you're talking about Arab slavery. They were taking people out of Africa to the tune of about 1 million a year for about 700 years. Starting in about the 8th century, they were bringing Africans out, clipping them, spade, neutering them, making the men eunuchs, and then of course taking the women. All right, and they were bringing, and then of course the Europeans jumped in. Around about the 13th century, the Europeans pretty much started to get in on the act. All right. But not anywhere close to what the Arabs were doing at that time. Again, Africa had its own problems, and being shipped here wasn't one of them. Not at that time. So you're talking basically slavery starting from the Caribbean and then the Americas, when you get to like Virginia, where Tasha's from, to the Carolinas, where Clee and I are from, North Carolina in particular. Word. All right. When you get to that, right, they started shipping us out as well. And of course they would transport us. They were also transporting us to and fro to the Caribbean, to South America, vice versa, and then calling that, you know, saying that these people are Africans. And they weren't even saying that at the time. My great-grandmother said something to me once. Now, she lived to be, she was on just a couple of months shy of 100 when she passed. Okay, so, you know, she passed in She passed in 98. So she was basically born in 1898. And she told me, for the most part, that she hadn't even, that whole African stuff, she said, for her, and her mother would tell her, that stuff is recent. That stuff is recent. This whole African stuff, they didn't know anything about no Africans, and if anything, they knew they weren't African. My grandmother used to say that, I ain't no African. I'm from right here. I don't know that African stuff, She said that Roots was a nice movie, but that ain't real. And of course, we used to think she was crazy because we're going to school at the time, and they're teaching us that we are Africans, right?
Right.
But our ancestors used to say this all the time. I mean, my grandfather used to say it. You said something about being an African too. I remember my grandmother didn't say much. My paternal grandmother, she didn't say much at all. All right. But when my dad came home with the whole, necklace stuff, we from Africa, I remember the look she gave him. And I remember she looked at him and said, "Nigga, please, you ain't hardly from no Africa. You need to get a grip." Yeah, oh yeah. That's the first time I ever, totally blew me away.
I know my
totally
mom. My mom, when I was a kid, said that her grandma was full-blooded indigenous.
Yeah.
But what tribe or whatever, I don't know. So, hey, I ain't gonna sit here and say no dumb shit like I'm 85% Nigerian or that. I ain't gonna talk no names.
That would kill me.
I ain't gonna talk no names. I ain't gonna say no dumb shit like that. I told my wife that. Keep in mind, my wife is a biology teacher. I told her that, and she looked at me like, "Who the fuck said that?" I'm like, "Hey." I mean, biology and genetically, biologically, if that's a word, that's impossible. But hey,
I don't get it. I don't get how the previous generation, the baby boom generation, or basically our parents, I don't get how they fell for the okie doke. But then again, I do, because the reality is Garvey came on the scene with the whole African deal with the Universal Negro Association, that stuff, Improvement Association, whatever the fuck. He came with that, but even in saying that with Garvey knew better as well. Garvey knew better, but which leads me to think that either Garvey was on some other stuff or he was an agent. And I'm inclined to believe, all things considered, he was educated in London, the whole nine. He died in London. I wouldn't be surprised if it was. I don't think he could have been an
agent, dude, because there's no way he's going to do what he did. Hey, there's no way. He ain't, dude. We ain't talking about Jesse Jackson here. We talking about Marcus Garvey. We talking about a dude who actually went out there and got people on board with his idea. And the sad part about it is he went to jail for that.
Oh, so, yeah. J. Edgar Hoover, J. Edgar Hoover got him.
Oh, no. But see, here's the sad part about it. When they originally started investigating him, J. Edgar was one of the chief investigators. And he even said himself, J. Edgar Hoover, as much as he liked black folks, even though we all know that J. Edgar Hoover was actually a black man. But He was. But J. Edgar Hoover even said he couldn't even find any misdoings. So when they tried to hit him up with fraudulent charges.
Well, they got him with the mail. They got him with the mail charges. But here's the scoop on that, though. The thing about that is, who hipped J. Edgar Hoover onto Garvey? It would be our boy. It would be our boy. Good grief, the French dude, the dude with the French name. I'm bugging out tonight. You have to forgive me. It was God, I can't think of his name. Good grief. No. One of the founders of the NAACP.
Du Bois?
Good grief.
Oh, Du Bois.
Yes, Du Bois. Yes, Du Bois. Du Bois actually reported. He actually reported Garvey to the State Department, and that's when they got a lock in on Garvey. Du Bois actually did that, and he did it mainly out of jealousy.
Wasn't Du Bois behind the whole Liberia thing? Wasn't he involved with that? Because I know they were trying to get indigenous. I know in Virginia they were trying to get indigenous people and other free people of color to leave their land here and go and locate over in Liberia. That was their plan. They were trying to depopulate the free people of color and certain more of a upper echelon of the colored community at the time. That's what they called them then, the colored community. So they're trying to get like what we call the bourgeois people and have them all move over to Africa. That's what they're trying to do. And I thought Du Bois was one of the people involved with that, and he was working with the government to get the funding to. And then there was another brother from Virginia. I can't remember his name, but he was. I think he became the first mayor of Liberia, or a government official. Mm-hmm. But they were working with Garvey at one point to help get people from America to move to Africa.
But Du Bois and Garvey didn't like each other. They didn't like each other at all. Actually, Du Bois didn't like Garvey. What's that?
I said Du Bois didn't get along with Booker T either.
No, not at all. Du Bois was a part of the black bourgeois, Harvard-educated, that type of deal. He was also a member of the Blue Vein Society, meaning that, he passed the paper bag test. His veins were such that, they were blue, so he was that light-skinned. And he was a member of that society, the Talented Templars and all that other stuff, that the light-skinned Negroes shall lead the rest because we have this white blood in our veins, and thus we are smarter than the other Negroes and all this, all that foolishness. Of course, exactly. So, okay.
So that's another reason why I didn't like him. Right.
Du Bois.
He won't pass back,
Du Bois got his comeuppance. He got his comeuppance to the point where a lot of the very bourgeois people that he mentored, to be good Americans and get away from their indigenous roots in nature, because you couldn't say what you were. Du Bois was quick to tell you that he was French, and this and that before he would say he was Indian. As a matter of fact, he didn't even want to hear that word. So a lot of the people that he mentored over the years, they turned on him in the 60s. They turned on it. They turned on him, and they said that he himself had gotten too radical. Now you're embracing some stuff that you taught us not to embrace. So like Buck said, producer said, and then his snitch ass died in Ghana. He left the country and went to Ghana. So yeah. But as far as Garvey, I'm not 100% sure that Garvey was 100% Dundee. I can't tell you that he is. I do know that before Garvey, they weren't on the whole, back to Africa deal. There was no real back to Africa movement going on before Garvey. And Garvey himself said that he got that mainly from his travel going back to Jamaica. He was talking with a guy who was going to Jamaica who was African. All right. Now, I do know that, of course, we know that Africans did land in Jamaica. We know this. So maybe it could be from that aspect. It could be from that aspect. The Maroons, however, most of your Maroons in Jamaica who pretty much, they started a revolution, went up into the hills and stayed, they were not African. They were not African at all. They were Arawaks. So, maybe
other indigenous people too joining.
Right, exactly.
So, yeah.
Okay, so we're pretty much. Let me ask you real quick. All right, let me ask you, Tasha. Okay, since we can't stray off course. So let me ask you. Okay, so when you found out about the deal, when you started finding the real, then I'll ask you too, Clee, when you guys started finding out the real deal about the lies that we were told, what did it do to you?
Oh man,
how did it make you feel? Let's start with you, Tasha.
I mean, it was kind of overwhelming at the time because you think and you trust in these people, been educated, for over 12 years with, in the system. You're not thinking that people are going to lie to you about who you are or what happened here. You kind of want to believe in everything, but once you start seeing the truth, you can't really. I mean, it's hard to explain because, like, every day I'm still finding out more stuff. Like, I'm thinking I know something, and then I start researching, and I find out, hey, I was completely wrong in what I had found out previously. So, yeah, but it really opened my eyes, like I said, speaking with the archaeologists and a couple of professors that I had. Yeah. So
a real eye opener, huh?
Yeah, I had this one professor. He worked at Georgetown and a couple other universities. On the first day of class, he's a history professor. He said that history is not real. It's just a written record of how the victor would like you to see the past. And he also said it's a theory based on oral tradition and evidence that you are allowed to see. So that really blew my mind, and it sparked something in me to dig deeper in my research.
What say you, Clee?
Well, let's be honest. Like, my whole where I'm sitting in dumbfounded wildness about history that I've been taught actually started 30 years ago. Sitting in my first history class in college my freshman year. And that was when my daggone history instructor said Lincoln was a racist. And you got to remember, here we were at that time, we thinking Lincoln was the greatest thing since sliced bread to black people. And then it come to find out that he didn't give two shits about us, and that he didn't think we were on equal footing to a white man. That right there kind of blew my mind. And it's been like from that day in '86, it's been like almost a wow. And I'm looking back like, wow, this is not what we were taught. I mean, took another history class and started learning other things. As a matter of fact, the history that I took, the second history that I took, quote unquote African American history from 18 something till, so like I said, quote unquote, because I don't use that word. But anyway, so I mean, it just opened my eyes to a whole bunch of other stuff. And over the last 5 years, it's been almost a eye-opening, where it's like so much stuff. And you have to ask the question, why? But you already know the question. It's the same. You already know the answer because it's the same thing about why you're only allowed to know only slave stories, Jim Crow stories, Suferian black stories, versus, and the only slave revolt that you're only allowed to know was led by a white man, being John Brown. You're not taught about Nat Turner. You're not taught about Denmark. You're not taught about these other people who had slave revolts. Hell, even people who had successful ones. You're not taught about that stuff. The only thing that you're ever taught about is you were dumb and happy on the damn plantation until some white people came along and said that was morally wrong, and they decided to try to change it. That's it.
Right.
Yeah.
You were free from slavery, but you weren't given full rights as a citizen in this country. And you stayed that way until the only person they'll give you is MLK, and that's because that's something that you can't hardly put in revisionist history because it happened so recently. Even though, it was 50 years ago, but it happened so recently, they can't put revisionist history on like they could for all the other stuff that they did that happened, say, a century ago.
But they will.
Oh,
they will.
They will. Just like all those pictures you see in the year 2022, show a picture of Tupac and it's a white guy with a bandana with Thug Life like that.
Yep.
Yeah, it will. It will.
Yeah. And Biggie will look like John Candy.
And
yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
hey, they had one with Christopher Reeve, that Superman, talking about the Malcolm X story. So.
And really quickly, people, it's actually Crispus Attucks fought in King Philip's War. I'm sorry, and that was a battle of the Wampanoag. Actually, that's when the Wampanoag and they went at it. So but real quickly, I do believe we have a call on the line, area code 920. Area code 920. You're on the Rich Report. What's on your mind?
Great show. I'm just sitting back listening, and I want to play devil's advocate.
Play on, brother.
Okay. Because we already know, and this is. Say it again.
What's your name, bro?
Nico.
What's going on, Nico?
Oh, what's up, bro?
Okay, let me play devil's advocate.
Okay.
The first question I would ask is, okay, this what we get a lot. So if we was indigenous, why do Native Americans get the land and the money?
They were given the land and the money to replace
somebody.
Which natives are you talking about?
The,
he means the ones that look like
the white folks, the European, the Irish-looking, the amalgamated people, the pale people we see, like Standing Rock, for example.
Right. Well, you answered your question. You said they're amalgamated. They're mixed with the European blood, so of course they're going to get certain benefits.
Okay. And this is what somebody else would ask. They would say, okay, why would they make up this big lie?
Why would they make it up?
Okay.
Yeah, I get you.
It goes back to the Indian slavery and reservation. When the first reservations were in Virginia, the Queen of Palmonky, she signed the Treaty of Middle Plantation, and that reserved us a certain portion of our land that was already ours. So what happened, some of our people got captured and sent into slavery. Some of our people stayed on reservations. Some of our people lived off the reservation, which made you a taxable Negro or mulatto instead of Indian. If you're on the reservation, you were an Indian. So that it's really the labeling of people. So if you got enslaved, it's hard, to keep your culture and keep your identity. Like we were talking earlier, your great grandmama, big mama, or whoever might say, "Oh, I'm Cherokee," or "I'm this and that," and you might just think she's crazy, and you just right there, and you don't pass on that oral tradition of who you are.
Right.
Some of us who are from free people of color, once you get into Christianity and religions, and you have to keep up this identity as a free Negro and free mulatto, and you're not involved into your tribe and your tribal heritage, you lose your identity like that as well. And then after Emancipation, that's when a lot of people who lived off the reservation, who knew they were indigenous, lost our identity because we intermixed with, people who didn't know who they were, or who might have been of African descent or mixed with European descent, and we didn't keep within our tribe or our phenotype, and we became African Americans or so-called Black Americans or whatever. We didn't have a nationality after that. We didn't have our,
the reason I want to play,
whatever tribe you're from.
The reason I want to play devil advocate, because it's this guy now. I don't really want to give him no promotion or his name, but this guy, he's using what I like to call hypnosis. And what he's doing, he's telling people, this is what he's telling the youth now. He's telling the youth that in the early 1900s, like it's early. It
ain't Umar, is it? Is it Umar?
No, it's not. It's not Umar.
Okay.
It's
all right. Go ahead.
Fat agent dude. But this guy,
Was it
he's telling people.
What's his name? What's that guy named?
I don't even want to give him any.
Go ahead.
But this guy, he's telling, and this is the problem. He's telling the youth. Now this is in America. He's telling the youth in the 1900s, their grandparents were directly. He said that the majority of our grandparents. He said the majority of African Americans. This is exact words. Their grandparents were directly from Africa, and they had a memory of Africa. And the thing is, I have never in my life heard an oral story of Africa, ever. And I haven't ran into a person who has ever heard an oral story of Africa, ever. So why would somebody in today's time, because he's trying to get people to go back to Africa, quote unquote. And the thing is, he said, we had a strong connection to Africa, and Nat Turner's mother was an African, and such and such. And I'm
God, that kills us.
No, his mother was Cherokee.
Yeah.
Not only that.
Yeah, his mother was Cherokee.
And this is the thing. In the 1900s, he's saying that everybody, like me, you, everybody, our grandparents were from Africa. This is what he's telling the children. And he's talking about we need to get back to Africa because we won't be held until we get back. And this is what they telling the children now. And this is crazy.
You're filling these children's head with lies. You know, I'm going to tell you, to answer your question when you were playing devil's advocate. And Tasha, she actually did, but I'll just give it a little bit more perspective. All right? Somewhere along the line, when Europeans started really profiting off of slavery, right, off of free labor, and keep in mind, when I say slavery, we were not all slaves. There were only probably at peak maybe about 4.5 million slaves in America, right, at its peak. But we were all colonized, however. So you had a lot of slaves on plantations, back, say, in even the 18th century, where they're working alongside freed blacks who, by this time, had been squeezed off of their land, their resources taken, and they're sharecropping. Right? So, and as Tasha, eloquently wrote earlier last week, that you had a lot of your white slave owners. They were right out there cropping along with their 1 or 2 slaves. They didn't have, they were broke, they were poor, so they had to get out there and do it, as well. So somewhere when the profits started actually raking in, particularly in the South, because the South had more resources, a plan was hatched to remove us off of our land so that they could take it and steal it. And to do that, they had to do it and come at, because they don't always come at you in one way, as you know. They come in a myriad of ways.
Right.
One of the ways was indoctrination, right? Indoctrination through education, indoctrination through religion, all right? The more educated that you forgot, you would be, more inclined to walk off and away from your own people, right? And it really took effect when, particularly, we started getting college educated and we would go back home and Big Mama's talking and telling you history and you don't want to hear it anymore because you're educated now. So, but there's no denial by Europeans that live here, those immigrants that run stuff here, that Indians existed. So somebody had to replace them. So all they did was make them whiter, make them lighter, and remember that your Mongoloid, your Siberian, those are Mongoloid, Siberian, European descent, their cultures sucked ass. So it was very easy for somebody like Iron Eyes Cody, right, whose parents are from Sicily, who comes from Sicily. They come to Louisiana. He's raised in Louisiana, the whole nine. He's raised actually poor, so he's raised around indigenous Indians. It's very easy for him to become one rather than stick to a culture that he despised anyway. They were slaves when, that's why his family ran over here. They were literally starving. So it's very easy to take a hold of a culture that is abundant and as rich and abundant as ours is. Even now, So, it's very easy for that to happen, actually. But somewhere along the line, a plan was hatched to remove us in classification so that we would have no ties to the land.
Can I say a couple more things? I got two questions in one statement.
Okay, real quick, bro. Go ahead.
Okay. I was trying to answer the question, though. If you want to get down to the documents and things, what happened at that time, after Emancipation and before Jim Crow, a lot of the poor white people who were sharecropping on the plantations or on the farms with the slaves, like Rich said, a lot of them, they hatched, like you said, they hatched a plan to go around in the South and burn down the courthouses that held the documents of the free people of color, their land grants and things like that on it or whatever. Right. So
and there you have it.
They burnt down the courthouses, and then what they would do, they have the squatter law that the Europeans made. They will go and build, they'll go build a shack or something on that person's land after they intimidated them, hung them, or burned a cross on their lawn and ran them out of town. So they'll go to that free person of color's land. They'll build a little shack on it, and the person, he done moved up to Chicago, he done moved to New York. He's afraid for his life. He's not coming back. And then that person owns that land. The whole family, all their land is gone, whatever they had. So that's how they assumed the land, and people lost their identity because if you're a tribal person, or have association with a tribe, and you move away, you have no contact with them. You're disassociated with the tribe, unless your whole tribe moves with you. With some actually did to New York and New Jersey and places like that.
Right. Exactly.
And that's how. And the only people who stayed on the reservation, they actually had. If you want to go into that, why they look like that. My people, the Pamunkey, they actually had a policy, a bleaching policy, where the women, if they wanted to marry someone who was non-European, they would have to, if they want to marry like a free man of color, they would have to leave the reservation. But the men on the reservation, they could bring the European wife to live there and to become an Indian, basically.
Yep.
Also, they had, European men who would come around and rape the women or try to marry the women or whatever. They had a whole lot of bleaching and things like that going on at the time. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure that happened at different reservations. One of my ancestors on the Mattaponi reservation, she had to leave because she wanted to marry a free man of color. He was actually Pamunkey and Scottish, so he was still indigenous, but he had lived off the land. So he owned property, so she had to leave to live on the property with him. And that when people and some of the members of the family, they don't even know that story, so they don't know who they are. They think they from Ghana or wherever they think they're from.
Yeah, they think they're from Nigeria, Ghana, you name it, they think they're from there. Real quick, I'm going to bring another caller in, area code 703. Area code 703, you're on the Rich Report. What's on your mind? Okay, not sure if they are there. You still on, brother?
Am I still on?
Yeah. Go ahead with your question, man. Go ahead with your question statement.
Okay.
We got about 30 minutes left in the show. Just real quick, Nick. We got about 30 minutes left in the show. So go ahead.
I don't even need 5 minutes.
Okay.
My statement is, my girlfriend has a friend from Somalia, and one day she brought to work the immigrant package that they have to learn the history of America.
Right.
And what she was telling me was that they have all of the so-called Indians as Europeans, and then they have it's a little pamphlet, it's not even that big, and then they have history of us. So that's how they learn about the so-called slave trade. And my question is there any remedy to this? Like, can we get back, or are we too far gone? And I'll let y'all go.
I think we're too far gone.
I appreciate it. You think we're too far gone, Clee?
Yeah, because you know what? The only thing people from other countries know is what the media puts out and what if that's the immigration package that they're putting out, that whiteified history, then there's no way to change it, because the fact of the matter is, you look at how, if you tell the truth, the real truth, what happens? You call it racist. You call it this, you call it that. You call it trying to spread hate. But when you tell that whiteified version, it's cool. Or you make it up, or we, because like we know that, hey, we did a lot more than just be slaves. We know we invented stuff. We know we did this. And it's like, I've honestly had people try to act like we just making up stuff.
Right.
It didn't really happen like that. Blah, blah, blah. So we're almost at a point where how's it going to ever change? Because we're going to have to get in a position of where we can dictate what is actually known, and to be able to influence people, make sure we are influencing people's perception the way everything actually happens.
Good point. Hey, we got another call on the line, area code 240. Area code 240, you're on the Rich Report. Speak your piece.
Wingapo, everyone. It's Windwalker.
Wingapo. What's going on, bro?
Hey. It's good to be here, as always. Couple things. Well, no, absolutely not. We're not too far gone. I mean, that's just like, you might as well go ahead and, sit by your chimney if you got one and wait for Santa Claus to come down. Okay, if you think we're too far gone. I'm not going out like that. You know that? I'm not going out like that.
Yo, when I was 3, you couldn't tell me Santa Claus wasn't real.
Exactly.
Well, hey.
but not after 3. You can best believe that.
Right. Took me a long time to let go of Santa Claus. And you think I'm going to let go of this? Hell no.
That's one way of looking at it.
But, I mean, here, we break it down to science. I mean, like I said, our blood type is our lifeline, and it's theirs also. So, I mean, we could just cut them right off at that. I mean, we got to go for the long game, okay? That's all there is to it. You get down and dirty, it's going to be painful to them as much as it's been painful to us for several hundred years. And, I mean, you mentioned that, okay, you didn't hear any of your grandparents say one word about Africans. No, never. I didn't. I know my mother's parents, my mother's grandparents, she's from South Carolina. They had a lot of land. And you're talking, they were born in the 1870s, and they had a lot of land. So all of our ancestors, indigenous ancestors, were not enslaved. They're, free men meant free landowners, which a lot of our people don't know.
Most
and
of
these
us are
Sambos, right. These Sambos out here, the Jesse Jacksons, the Sharptons, I mean, he had a lot of nerve. They put that out there. Oh, Trump, we're going to fight you on this. Get the hell. Go ahead and fight all you want. We'll sit back and watch the show and continue doing what we started to do, which is to reorganize, set up our networks. We're going to be building our own schools, our own organic food. I mean, Monsanto, they don't stand a chance. I mean, it's going to be ugly. I mean, and what a lot of people don't realize, okay, the Wasichus already organized. They know that this is a corporation. North Dakota, I just found out North Dakota has had their own centralized state bank under the gold standard since 1909. I just found this out. Yeah, I mean, the veil is down. I mean, Western states are already organizing. They know what's going on. That this is a corporation. That all of the counties, the cities are set up as corporations, subsidiaries. Over 37,000 of them. They know this. So yeah.
Good
and
point.
like I said, you talk Clee. I'll tell you what, Clee. If you wanna, reach out, okay, and let me know when you can set up the grand gala at the African American Embassy, okay? going to set up a charter membership with the United Indigenous People of America to do business with the African American Chamber of Commerce, okay?
That'll be on the 32nd day of November.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Okay, real quick. Hold on, Windwalker. I believe we have another call on the line. Area code 205. Area code 205. You're on the Rich Report. Speak your piece. Okay. Not sure. Oh, here we go. Yes, we can.
Hey,
what's going on, Buck?
Hey, what's going on, man? I got to go ahead and agree with Windwalker. No, we not too far away, but we got to stop this dumb shit. And at the moment now where you got, feeling sad over this Trump thing, this is the time when you go ahead and get these dudes, these brothers who pretend like we're foreigners. This is when you go ahead and get in because they know they about to get their asses smashed. They've been pumping this African stuff, and you see this Captain Barack Obama does when he killed the word Negro, when he's trying to replace the word Negro. So it's obvious that they're trying to erase. I don't say we're too far away. We just got to let the people that don't really think about nothing, just got to let them know, man.
Yeah, well, I agree with that. But I understand where Clee is coming from because basically what they've done is they've created a puzzle, in a riddle trapped inside of an enigma. And, but that's the construct of how they do things. White supremacy is also three-pronged as well. You have to understand that, Neely Fuller Jr. was right. It's basically a construct, and we have to deconstruct it. The same for what happened, with our legacy. We have to do the same thing. We have to deconstruct our legacy. It's amazing to me that, okay, this is how far it's gone. It's gone to the point where we were Indians, okay? We went from being Indians where we returned to Negroes, and to very mention if you say that you were Negro or Indian, whatever, tribe you were from, if you said it in public in a white town, you could be beaten for it. Now it's to the point where we would then say, I'm half black and I'm half Cherokee, or I'm half black and half Blackfoot or Choctaw or whatever. Now I have Indian in my family. And that's it. That's where we are now.
Well, that's right. That's right. But those people can't be used. You can't use people that don't know nothing. That ain't how it works.
True.
Other people don't do it. We're about to be. I think somebody said it tonight about the lady coming in the White House. She's a Russian chick, Trump's wife. Now we can keep.
She's a hostess. Yes.
Yeah. Now we can keep acting like little pussies and keep acting like we the victims and keep acting like it ain't going our way. We can keep doing that. I would advise against it. We don't know nothing and it took us too long. We see the hand right on the wall. And I think if we stay in that mindset, it's going to be real ugly for us because we see where we at now.
Well, we're at critical mass now.
Yeah, we're at critical mass now.
Yeah.
So I think something can be done, but it can't be this old bullshit that we've been doing for these past 50 years.
Well, a lot of us going to have to give up white Jesus for that to happen. Just saying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hey, hey, Tasha. Is Tasha still on? Okay, not sure if Tasha is still on or not. But I agree we can do something, but we're going to have to start thinking. And the biggest problem right now is we have been dumbed down and we no longer think. We just don't. We don't bother to think. We don't try. And we don't care to bother. It's not that we're dumb as much as we're dense. We're just willfully ignorant, and we don't care to think. I remember once upon a time, essentially going into, because a ghetto is a ghetto, all right? But I do remember when you would go into, and my grandparents even more so would tell me this, when you went into our neighborhoods back in the day, our neighborhoods were spiffy and clean. Right? Because most of us, this is their property, this is their land. They understood who they were, even though they were keeping the secrets of us, our indigenous nature. Right? And then all of a sudden, I remember, our neighborhood's just getting fucked up. Trash, litter everywhere, glass bottles being broken, all this crazy stuff. And the very person that would do it, and you would see them and say, well, this ain't our land anyway. You know, that foolishness. You know, and this is where we are now. They've got us thinking that this very land that is ours, all right, isn't ours anymore, and we're just kind of like weebles. You know, we wobble, but we don't fall down, but we wobbling like a mofo. I don't know.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
I don't know. Windwalker, you still on, bro?
I'm still here.
Okay. All right. So, and hey,
I'm still here.
That embassy, bro. That African American embassy. Hey, man, you got an African American museum. Don't give them any thoughts, bro. They'll get up. They'll have galas. They'll have fundings. They'll do a Jerry Lewis telethon type stuff, and next thing you know, you'll see an embassy. It wouldn't do anything, but you know, they'll build it. Yeah, no doubt.
On that, okay, 100 years later, the Negro is still in exile in his own land. Now, what are they gonna do? And now they don't have one exhibit, not one piece of history for Martin Luther King that's dead. Okay, in that museum, they don't have anything of his on exhibit yet. They say it's because
of course not. Of course not. We got about 15 minutes left. I just wanted to ask Tasha real quick, all right? In terms of I think you might be muted, Tasha. I think you. I'm not sure if you're muted or not. Okay, you hear me? I just heard you.
Hello? You heard me? Okay.
There you go. Okay, cool. I just wanted to ask you really quickly, all right? Okay, we got about 15 minutes left. Again, 657-383-0630. 15 minutes left. Feel free to call in. We're going to talk about it. And 2 hours ain't enough time for this because you're talking about something that's the better part of 7 centuries now, and you can't get it all in 2 hours. But, okay, in terms of where we are now, right, in terms of, do you think, I mean, and Clee, you're correct, but how do you think, Tasha, that slavery still exists today? Because we know slavery never left, but how do you define slavery today? How do you see it?
We're in more of a debt slavery.
Yes.
Like it began here, like an indentured servitude employee type of slavery most people are in. So it's kind of like they took away chattel slavery to kind of introduce this wide range debt slavery to everyone, to include everyone. That's how I personally feel. But
Agreed.
Most people are in debt to the banks and to their student loans and things like that. So that's kind of how it switched over to outright slavery.
Agreed. Well, how do you see it, Clee?
I would have to agree because that system of slavery, debt slavery, started with sharecropping. Because,
True.
You know, for your survival, you got a place to stay, but you had to work the land and the crops, and it was explained to you that the crops that you actually were able to get in and sell, that, you know, at the end of the season, the money went to whomever, and they sold it, and they used whatever excuse they could to say, hey, you're only going to get this much. So you find out that you actually still are behind the 8 ball, so you literally have to keep doing this, and it was a never-ending cycle. And
Agreed.
And one thing about it was, and this is something that I also noticed with poor whites, and that's why I keep telling people that when you went to college back in them days, that was something of people who had money, because it was believed that everybody who was poor, every available hand had to be working to bring in money for the survival of the family. So that's how people stay poor, and they stayed in that hole because it was the mentality of the whole thing. Everybody was, we got all these family members. Everybody needs to be taken care of, and the only way we can take care of is if everybody contributes. So with that mentality, no one was able to or allowed to stray away from that, and you had to be working. So that's how a lot of this slave mentality still continues and still goes on.
True. Windwalker, what do you think, bro?
Well, this counterfeit artificial institutions that have been set up. Okay, we got to step out of that. And they've got these Sambos, they're agents who've been in our communities, the pimps in the pulpits, the fraternities, the sororities, the Freemasons, because they are not Masons, okay? I tell every Freemason that I run across, okay, water freezes at 32 degrees, 33 degrees. They don't have 360 degrees, and that stops them right there. Out of this artificial counterfeit bullshit, because that's exactly what it is, which is happening. That's what this election was about, okay? That's why Trump is in there. There's a secret covert war going on in the background. A lot of people don't know about.
Of course.
And
of course,
the gold standard is going to be re-implemented here. The U.S. dollar is going to crash. It's kind of lock and load. And the poorly educated, they think they got, carte blanche to go yippee-ki-yay, but the Ku Klux Klan, they already got slammed by the Lumbian, and we will crush them. We'll crush them all. I mean, it's happening right now. People are already talking. People that I've been in communication with in Philly, down south, out on the West Coast, up in Chicago, Detroit. It's on. And I'm not talking about this bullshit about Black Lives Matter out there with these protests today, because we know that's staged by Soros and company.
They're the modern day NAACP. That's all they are.
Right. Right.
That's all they are.
Yeah.
I mean, their house of cards is coming crashing down, and they know this. I mean, a lot of people they might think that I'm crazy, or they don't realize. Okay, the Knights Templar, all of that, the Knights Columbus, they're all connected. The Dirty Moors, and the fact that we're indigenous, we're coming online, and we are the God race, and they know that they can't. We'll crush them. So no worries. No worries.
We got this. I got you.
We got this. We got this. That's right. Turtle Island is our motherland. We got this.
Well, I agree with all of you. It is debt slavery, and it was sharecropping in the South and the Industrial Revolution in the North. A lot of people don't tend to forget that with the Industrial Revolution, just like in England, in New York in particular, Boston, places like that, a lot of kids worked. They didn't go to school. They worked. They had to work.
Yeah.
A lot of the times the kids support families. That's why they had to have child labor laws over the course of time, because kids were working, 15, 16, 17-hour days sometimes. Parents were working from sea to can't see. They were getting meager earnings. A lot of your skilled carpentry work, things of that nature, went to us, and to the point where they started blocking us off. All right? Keep in mind that New York, your skyscrapers were mainly built off of indigenous Indians, mainly Mohicans. A lot of them have a predilection to height. They don't fear height. So a lot of them, your skyscrapers that were built, the Mohicans built them. So, the whole last Mohicans, where they had to wipe down to the very last man, woman, and child, doubtful. Well, we know that's actually not true. That's actually more propaganda. Sure, they were defeated, and sure, they were dispersed, and, a lot of genocide went on. But, no, the reality of it is the slavery today is basically, it's like you said, it's not chattel slavery, it's debt slavery. Everything is financial. All crimes are financial. Everything you do costs. It costs to hunt. It costs to fish. It costs to shit. You got to pay for water. You got to pay for if you want to keep your house cool, and you got to pay to cool it. You got to pay to heat it, and that's the name of the game. See, because white supremacy, it always refines itself. It's like a triple helix. It's ever moving, ever changing. It never stops, and it's always working to evolve. And the idea that people think that that we're going to, what the cops are doing now, they're trying to wipe us out. No, they're not. They're just sending a statement. That's all they're doing to us. But they need us. You take black folks, indigenous black folks out of America off. Let's say they wipe us out. Do you realize in 10 years, even in the land of milk and honey, as they call it, they would go into a dark age? They're culture vultures. They can't live without us. But they don't want us to know that they can't live without us, so they treat us as subordinates. That's where the whole white privilege thing comes in, which is a mental illness, by the way. Which is a mental illness. Okay, final thoughts, Tasha.
Okay, final thoughts on which subject?
Whatever's on your mind. Whatever's on your mind. Any final thoughts that you might want to share?
I just wanted to say that, we as a people need to do more researching on ourselves, on our families, doing our genealogy, instead of taking other people's word on who we are. And, start from there, question everything, and, never stop learning.
True. And keep an open mind. Keep an open mind. That's the deal. I mean, for me, when you and Clee were talking about when you found out and how it changed you, how you felt. I remember when I was all pro-black in the Afrocentric phase, X-hats, all that stuff, man, back in the day. But I used to always get these little signals. And one of them I got was I think I told this before. I was in Berkeley, California, and I was sitting at a cafe, and this white dude, but he had on American Indian gear, right? He had on, the tribal, chief head gear, right? And he's sitting at a table, and I'm reading a book, and I'm looking at him, he's looking at me, and I'm thinking to myself, this cat ain't no Indian. You know what I'm saying? Okay, and then when he spoke to me, he had a heavy, thick Polish accent, right? I mean, he clearly was an immigrant. He was Polish all the way down. So I asked him what was he doing, and he was basically filing paperwork to prove that he was Native American, and because he had some relatives that had come over years before, and they became American Indians, right? But because he was trying to get some land just outside of Palo Alto near Stanford University. Okay, so he's trying to get this land, and he's having to try to prove this. And he said to me, this is 95. He said, but in truth, you should be filling out this paperwork. We all know it's you guys' land, but y'all don't want it. You guys either don't know or you act like you don't want it. I'm in my black Afrocentric phase, what you mean, dude? All this stuff. But, he made sense but I never forgot it, and it stayed on my mind. And then I come to find out that he did indeed get those 4 acres of land. He did get those. He proved, he did the paperwork to prove that he was a Native, not an Indigenous American, but a Native American. This guy's, he sounded like, man, he sounded like some Polish cat who just came over on a boat. His accent was that thick, right? He couldn't even disguise it. But yet he got 4 acres of land by proving he was a Native American. And that kind of set me on a course. Okay, we got about 2 minutes left in the show, so I want to thank my guest first off, Tasha. Thank you for coming on. It was a pleasure having you on. I just can't thank you enough. And we didn't really get deep into it, so hopefully you'll come back again and we can discuss this again, because we didn't even get into like the 18th century and the whole 17th, 18th century like we wanted to. Just so many things to talk about, so many things to discuss. I'd like to thank the callers for calling in. Thank you all. As always, Clee, love you, fam. Windwalker.
All right.
We got this, brother. We got this. All right.
Absolutely.
You know it. You know it,
I'm
man.
going to get you down. Get your guys, Warrior and Ojibwe. Get your die.
Got that. Got it. Windwalker teaches me, actually, I learned a bit on my own, but Windwalker teaches me the language. So, I listen to him. Trust me, I listen. I'd like to thank the other callers calling in. D, Nico, if we didn't get to you, I apologize. It's only 2 hours, and we get engrossed in the conversation. But, just keep tuning in, and we're going to keep bringing some really great subjects. And, again, people, we're not trying to teach you anything. We're just throwing it out here, and it's up for you to decide whether you want to receive it or not. But all I ask is that you just keep an open mind. So if you're on a quest for truth, stay on that quest. Keep an open mind, and when you find that truth, you got to understand it, okay? Because the truth sometimes will slap the shit out of you. It really will.
It will.
So you got to take it, put your hands on your face, rub it off, and just accept it for what it is. So until next week, we'll be back. We'll have another show next week, and tune in. We're going to make it happen, Captain. To everybody, peace. Ona.
Ona.
Ona. Piscanosh.